The British Army fought World War II with a mix of old reliability and desperate innovation. Here is every standard infantry weapon they carried into battle. You have to start with the rifle that saw the British Army through the first half of the century. The short magazine Lee Enfield No. 1 Mark III Star was the standard issue at the outbreak of the war. Soldiers loved this bolt-action rifle because it was fast and held 10 rounds of .303 ammunition. Most other nations only gave their soldiers 5 rounds. A trained soldier could fire up to 30 aimed shots a minute with this thing. It used a sliding ramp rear sight that was great for precision but hard to produce quickly. After the losses at Dunkirk, Britain needed more rifles than the factories could make, so they had to simplify the design. That need for speed and simpler production led to the Lee Enfield No. 4 Mark I. This became the workhorse of the war from 1941 onward. It was heavier than the old version and had a heavier barrel, which actually helped accuracy. The biggest change was the sight. Instead of the old ramp, they put a simple aperture peep sight right at the back of the receiver. This gave soldiers a longer sight radius and made aiming much faster in combat. They also ditched the fancy sword bayonet for a simple steel spike that looked like a large nail. It was ugly, but it did the job. When the fighting moved to the thick jungles of Burma and the Pacific, the standard rifles were just too long and heavy. That is where the Lee Enfield No. 5 came in. The troops called it the jungle carbine. Engineers chopped nearly 5 inches off the barrel and hollowed out the bolt handle to save weight. It weighed 2 pounds less than the standard rifle, which made it great for carrying on long patrols in the heat. The downside was the recoil. Because it was lighter and had a flash hider on the muzzle, it kicked like a mule and had a wandering zero problem, where the sights would drift after firing. Officers and tank crews needed something they could use with one hand, and that usually meant the Enfield No. 2 or the Webley Mark IV. These were break-top revolvers. You pushed a lever and the whole barrel tipped forward to eject the shells. It made reloading faster than the American revolvers, where the cylinder just swung out. They fired a .38 caliber round that many soldiers felt was too weak to stop an in-charging enemy. The design was incredibly robust though. You could drop it in the mud and it would still fire, but you had to be close enough to hit your target. Later in the war, the British started issuing a modern semi-automatic pistol called the Browning High Power. This was mostly for airborne troops and commandos who needed more firepower. It was a massive upgrade over the revolvers because the magazine held 13 rounds of 9mm ammunition. That's more than double what the revolver carried. It was actually the same pistol the Germans were using, but the British version was made in Canada. It fit the hand perfectly and is still considered one of the most comfortable pistols ever made. It gave paratroopers a fighting chance if they landed away from their main gear. Before the British could make their own submachine guns, they bought the Thompson from America. The British used the M1928A1 model with the vertical foregrip and the famous drum magazine. Commandos loved it because it fired the heavy .45 caliber American round that hit like a sledgehammer. The problem was the weight. A loaded Thompson weighed over 10 pounds, which is heavier than their main battle rifle. It was also incredibly expensive to build. As the war dragged on and money got tight, the British Army realized they could not afford to equip everyone with these beautifully machined American guns. Desperation led to the Sten gun. This is probably the most famous piece of plumbing in military history. It looked like a muffler with a trigger because that's basically what it was. It cost about $10 to make and only had 47 parts. It fired 9mm rounds from a side-mounted magazine that tended to cause jams if you held it wrong. Soldiers hated it at first because it felt cheap and could accidentally fire if you dropped it. However, it was light and easy to hide. It allowed Britain to arm resistance fighters across Europe by dropping these out of airplanes by the thousands. While the riflemen held the line, the section relied on the Bren gun for serious firepower. This light machine gun is often called the best of the war. It was accurate enough to snipe with, but reliable enough to pour automatic fire into enemy positions. It fed from a curved 30-round magazine mounted on top of the gun. This meant the sights had to be offset to the left. The barrel could be changed in seconds when it got too hot. Unlike the German machine guns that fired incredibly fast, the Bren fired slowly. This helped soldiers stay on target and saved ammunition. For heavy, sustained fire, the British stuck with the Vickers machine gun. This was a brutal relic from World War I that just refused to quit. It was water-cooled, meaning it had a jacket around the barrel filled with water to stop it from overheating. It weighed nearly 30 pounds without the tripod or the water. It fired from a cloth belt and could shoot all day as long as you kept the water topped up. There are stories of Vickers guns firing millions of rounds in a single engagement without breaking. It was mostly used by specialized machine gun battalions to lock down entire areas. After the evacuation of Dunkirk, Britain dragged the old Lewis guns out of storage. These were recognizable by the big cooling shroud around the barrel that looked like a cannon and the flat pan magazine on top that spun around as it fired. They were mostly given to the Home Guard and used for airfield defense. The pan held 47 or 97 rounds. It was heavy and complicated to clean, but in the dark days of 1940, any gun that fired bullets was worth its weight in gold. It served its purpose until enough Bren guns could be manufactured to replace it. When it came to stopping tanks, the infantry started the war with the Boys anti-tank rifle. This was basically a bolt-action rifle scaled up to a massive size. It fired a 55 caliber steel core bullet intended to punch through armor. It worked fine against light tanks in the desert, but against thicker German armor, it was useless. The recoil was punishing. It bruised shoulders and famously caused fierce headaches for anyone who fired it. Soldiers joked that the name Boys was ironic because it took a giant to shoot it. By the middle of the war, it was mostly used to knock out trucks and bunkers. The replacement for the anti-tank rifle was the PIAT. This stood for Projector Infantry Anti-Tank. It was a bizarre weapon that didn't use a rocket. Instead, it used a massive steel spring to launch a shaped charged bomb. When you pulled the trigger, a heavy spigot slammed forward to ignite the propellant in the bomb's tail. It had no backblast, so you could fire it from inside a building, but cocking the spring required standing up and pulling with all your strength. It was dangerous and awkward, but it was the only thing the infantry had that could kill a Tiger tank. For heavy indirect fire at the platoon level, soldiers carried the 2-inch mortar. This was a tiny tube that looked almost like a toy compared to heavy artillery. It had no bipod, and the soldier just held the barrel and aimed by eye. It fired a small explosive shell or a smoke round. The smoke was actually its most important job. If a machine gun pinned the squad down, the mortar man could pop a smoke screen right in front of the enemy to let his friends move. It weighed only about 10 pounds, so it could go wherever the infantry went. Finally, every British soldier was familiar with the Mills bomb. This was the standard number 36 M bomb. It looked like a little pineapple made of cast iron. It had a heavy lever and a 4-second fuse. Once he pulled the pin and threw it, the iron casing shattered into lethal fragments. It was designed to be thrown from behind cover because the shrapnel could fly further than a man could throw the grenade. It was a defensive weapon meant to clear trenches and rooms. It remained in service for years because it was simple, safe to carry, and deadly effective.